Sometimes the knock on your door changes everything. Sometimes it brings back what you've spent a lifetime trying to forget. Callen Byrd has lived alone in the Cascade Mountains for over 20 years, far from people and the pain they bring. She knows these woods better than anyone. But on a freezing November night, an elderly woman appears at her cabin door during a blizzard, barefoot, confused, with no idea how she got there. Callen takes her in, thinking she'll just wait out the storm and call for help. Then the old woman starts remembering things. Things about Callen's family. Things about these mountains. Things that happened 30 years ago that no stranger should know. What is really happening in these woods? Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something truly special for you. The wind had been building since mid-morning, carrying that particular bite that meant serious snow was coming. Callen Byrd stood at her cabin window, watching the first flakes begin to fall, and felt the old familiar satisfaction of being prepared. She had lived in these mountains long enough to read the weather like other people read newspapers. 23 years this December, though sometimes it felt like a lifetime, and other times like no time at all. The cabin was small but solid, built with her own hands from timber she'd felled and milled herself. 2 rooms, a main living space with a wood stove and kitchen area, and a smaller bedroom just big enough for a bed and a chest of drawers. No electricity, no running water except what she hauled from the spring, no phone service. The nearest town was 15 miles down a logging road that became impassable from November through April. Exactly the way she wanted it. She had a routine, and routines kept you alive in the wilderness. Check the weather radio twice daily. Maintain the woodpile. Keep the larder stocked with dried goods, canned vegetables, smoked meat. Inspect the roof and chimney before the first snow. Set snares for rabbits. Ice fishing when the lakes froze solid. She knew every trail within a 20-mile radius, every animal track, every sound the forest made at different times of day and night. The locals down in Ridgeway called her the Ghost Woman when they talked about her at all. She came into town maybe 4 times a year for supplies she couldn't make or hunt herself. Salt, flour, ammunition, kerosene. She didn't linger or make conversation. Most people had stopped trying to engage her after the first few years. That suited Callen just fine, but there were a few who remembered why she'd come to the mountains in the first place. Old Sheriff Dutton, now retired, who'd led the search parties back then. Mary Chen, at the general store, who'd been a young clerk and had watched Callen transform from a desperate, hollow-eyed woman of 22 into the weathered, self-sufficient tracker she was now. They didn't ask questions anymore. They understood that some people came to the wilderness to find something, and others came to stop looking. Callen was 52 years old, though she rarely thought about her age. Her body was lean and strong from years of physical labor. Her hands were calloused, her face lined from sun and wind. Her dark hair, threaded now with silver, hung in a braid down her back. She moved through the forest like she was part of it, quiet, efficient, aware of everything around her. What the people in town didn't know was that Callen occasionally worked. When hikers went missing, when hunters failed to return, sometimes the rangers would make the trek up to her cabin and ask for help. She was the best tracker in the Cascades, maybe in the entire Pacific Northwest. She could read a broken twig, a displaced rock, a faint depression in moss that most people would never notice. She found people that search and rescue teams had given up on. She never asked for payment, and she never explained why she helped. But she knew why. Every person she found was a small redemption. Every lost hiker she guided back to safety was a tiny piece of the debt she could never fully repay. Because 30 years ago, Callen's family had disappeared in these mountains, and she had been the only one to survive. She didn't think about it most days. That was the gift of routine, of physical exhaustion, of a life stripped down to essential tasks. But on nights like this, with a storm rolling in and the wind howling through the pines, the memories came whether she wanted them or not. Her father, Jack Byrd, had been a civil engineer with a passion for camping. Her mother, Susan, a high school music teacher with a love of nature. and Tommy, her little brother, 10 years old and fascinated by rocks. He'd collected them everywhere they went, examining each one carefully, sometimes carving little symbols into the smooth ones with a pocket knife their father had given him. They'd come to the Cascades for a week-long camping trip in August, 30 years ago this past summer. Callen had been 22, recently graduated from college, uncertain about her future. The trip was supposed to be a celebration, a last family adventure before she started her adult life. They'd set up camp near a place called Deadfall Canyon, a remote area known for its dramatic rock formations and pristine wilderness. Callen had hiked out alone one morning to scout a trail for the family. She'd been gone perhaps 3 hours. When she returned, they were gone. Not just gone, vanished. The camp was undisturbed. The tent still stood. Food was still on the portable camp stove. Her father's backpack was still hanging from a tree branch. But her family had disappeared, as if they'd simply stepped out of reality. The search had lasted weeks. Rangers, volunteers, tracking dogs, even helicopters. They found nothing. No signs of a struggle. No tracks leading away from the camp. No evidence of an animal attack. The official conclusion eventually was a rock slide. Deadfall Canyon was notorious for unstable rock formations. The theory was that they'd hiked into the canyon, despite warnings, had been caught in a slide, and their bodies were buried under tons of stone. But Callen had never believed it. Her father was too careful, too experienced. He wouldn't have taken his family into a dangerous area. And if there had been a rock slide significant enough to bury 3 people, there would have been evidence, disturbed earth, fresh rockfall, something. She'd stayed in the mountains after the search ended, unable to leave the last place her family had been. She taught herself to track, to survive, to read the wilderness like a language. And she'd searched. For years, she'd searched every trail, every canyon, every hidden corner of these mountains. She'd never found a trace. Eventually, the searching had become living. The grief had become a dull, permanent ache she carried like an old injury. She'd built the cabin, established her routines, and let the years pass. She was content in her solitude, or if not content, at least accustomed to it. The few people who made it up to her cabin always asked the same question. "Aren't you lonely?" The answer was complicated. Yes, she was lonely, but loneliness was safer than connection. Loneliness couldn't disappear on you without warning. It couldn't leave you hollow and searching for the rest of your life. Outside, the snow was falling harder now. Callen checked her supplies one more time. A habit so ingrained, she did it without thinking. Firewood stacked high. Water containers filled from the spring before it iced over. Food enough for months if necessary. The weather radio sat on a shelf near the stove, its battery indicator showing full charge. She was ready for the storm. She was always ready. Callen prepared a simple dinner, venison stew with root vegetables from her fall harvest. She ate slowly, watching the snow accumulate on the windowsill. The wind was howling now, shaking the cabin walls. This was going to be a significant storm. She might be snowed in for days, maybe a week. The thought didn't trouble her. She had books to read, equipment to maintain, a life that continued just fine without the outside world. After dinner, she banked the fire and settled into her chair with a book, a worn copy of Walden that she'd read a dozen times. But tonight, her attention kept drifting to the window. The storm had an odd quality to it. The wind seemed to circle the cabin rather than blow straight through. The snow fell in swirling patterns that almost looked deliberate. She shook her head at her own fancy. It was just a storm. She'd weathered hundreds of them, but as the evening deepened and the wind grew louder, Callen felt something she rarely experienced. Unease. It wasn't fear exactly, more like the sensation you get when you're being watched in the forest. That prickle at the back of your neck that tells you to pay attention. She got up and checked the door, barred and secure. Checked the window latches. Added more wood to the fire. Everything was fine. Everything was always fine. Then she heard it, a knock at the door. Callen froze. It wasn't possible. No one came up here in good weather, let alone during a blizzard. The road would be impassable. The nearest neighbor was 8 miles away. Rangers wouldn't come at night in these conditions. The knock came again. 3 deliberate raps, clearly audible over the storm. Callen's hand went to the hunting knife she always kept at her belt. She approached the door slowly. "Who's there?" No answer, just the howl of the wind. She waited, listening. The knock came a 3rd time. Against every instinct of caution, Callen unbarred the door and opened it. An elderly woman stood on her threshold, soaked to the skin and shivering violently. She wore only a thin nightgown, torn and muddy, and her feet were bare and bleeding. Snow clung to her white hair. Her eyes were confused, frightened. "Lost, help me," the woman whispered. "Please, I don't know where I am." Callen stared for one frozen moment of disbelief. Then her survival training kicked in. She reached out and pulled the woman inside into the warmth, out of the storm that should have killed her hours ago. Callen's mind raced through protocols, even as her hands moved automatically. Hypothermia, shock, potential frostbite. She guided the woman to the chair nearest the stove and immediately began assessing the damage. The woman was old, early 80s, Callen guessed. Her skin was pale and cold to the touch, lips tinged blue. She trembled uncontrollably, that violent shaking that meant the body was still trying to warm itself. Good, that meant she wasn't too far gone. "Stay with me," Callen said firmly. "Can you tell me your name?" The woman's eyes struggled to focus. "Velda, I think. Velda Crane." "Okay, Velda, I'm Callen. You're safe now. I need to get you out of these wet clothes." She worked quickly, removing the torn nightgown and wrapping the woman in wool blankets from her bed. The nightgown was expensive, good cotton with embroidered trim, but it was shredded in places and stained with mud and what looked like blood. Velda's feet were cut and bruised, embedded with pine needles and small stones. She'd walked a long distance barefoot. Callen heated water and prepared a warm, not hot drink of weak tea with honey. Too much heat too fast could be dangerous. She made Velda sip it slowly while she examined the foot injuries. Nothing too deep, but they'd need cleaning and bandaging. "Velda, can you tell me where you came from? How you got here?" The old woman's brow furrowed with concentration. "I was home. In my apartment. In Seattle." She looked around the cabin, confusion deepening. "Where am I?" "You're in the Cascade Mountains, about 15 miles from the nearest town. Do you remember leaving Seattle?" "No, I don't understand." "I was watching television. I went to bed. And then I was walking. It was cold, so cold, and I couldn't stop walking." Her voice rose with distress. "I don't remember." "Why don't I remember?" Callen kept her voice calm. "It's okay. Sometimes when people are in shock, their memory gets foggy. It'll come back. Right now, let's focus on getting you warm and tended to." But even as she spoke soothingly, Callen's mind was working through the impossibility of the situation. Seattle was more than 200 miles away. Even if Velda had been dropped off by someone with ill intent, which didn't explain the nightgown and bare feet, the logging road up to the cabin was impassable in this storm. No vehicle could have made it, and the condition of Velda's feet suggested she'd walked for miles, through rough mountain terrain, in freezing temperatures. At her age, that should have been impossible. Callen cleaned and bandaged the wounds while Velda sipped the tea. Color was slowly returning to the old woman's face. The violent shivering had subsided to occasional tremors. "How long have I been walking?" Velda asked. "I don't know." "Can you remember anything about the journey? Which direction you came from?" Velda closed her eyes, thinking. Trees, so many trees. And rocks. I remember climbing over rocks. And water. I crossed a stream, I think. My feet were numb by then. She opened her eyes and looked at Callen with sudden focus. There was a trail. Not a real trail, but markers. Little piles of stones. Callen went still. Cairns. You followed cairns. If that's what they're called, yes. They had marks on them, scratches like someone carved them. Velda frowned. "I don't know why I followed them. I just knew I should." Callen stood and moved to the window, her heart pounding. Cairns weren't unusual in the mountains. Hikers built them all the time. But something about Velda's description disturbed her deeply. She turned back. "Velda, I need to try to reach the authorities. Let them know you're here. My radio might not work in this storm, but I should try." She moved to the shelf where she kept the weather radio. It was an emergency band radio. capable of reaching the ranger station in Ridgeway on good days. She switched it on and adjusted the frequency, static. She tried several channels. More static, with occasional bursts of what might have been voices, but were too distorted to understand. The storm was creating too much interference. "I can't get through," she told Velda. "We'll have to wait until the storm breaks. Could be tomorrow, could be a few days. You'll stay here. I have enough supplies for both of us." Velda nodded, looking relieved. "Thank you. I'm so sorry to trouble you." "No trouble. I've lived up here for over 20 years. I'm used to surprises." It was a lie. This was unlike anything Callen had experienced, but it seemed to comfort the old woman. Callen prepared food, warm broth and bread, and watched as Velda ate slowly. The woman's color continued to improve, though exhaustion was evident in every movement. When the bowl was empty, Callen helped her to the bedroom. "You take the bed tonight," Callen said. "I'll sleep out here by the stove." Velda protested weakly, but she was asleep almost before her head touched the pillow. Callen covered her with extra blankets and stood watching for a moment. In sleep, Velda looked peaceful, almost serene. Nothing like the confused, half-frozen woman who'd appeared at the door. Callen returned to the main room and began a more careful examination of the ruined nightgown. The tears weren't random. They followed specific patterns, as if Velda had pushed through thick underbrush. The mud was mixed with what looked like moss and lichen. And the blood! Callen dabbed at it with a damp cloth and frowned. Some of it was clearly from Velda's injured feet. But there were other stains that didn't match. She set the nightgown aside and tried the radio again. Still nothing but static and that occasional burst of distorted sound. She could have sworn one of the bursts sounded like words, something about a storm warning. But the voice had an odd quality, like it was coming from very far away or very long ago. Callen settled into her chair, but sleep was impossible. Her mind kept circling back to the same questions. How had an elderly woman from Seattle ended up on her doorstep? Why couldn't Velda remember anything about her journey? And those cairns she'd mentioned, where had they led from? More troubling was something Velda had said while Callen was treating her feet. In her confused state, she'd mumbled something about finding the way back, and they said someone would help. Who were they? And back to what? The wind continued to howl around the cabin. Callen added wood to the fire and watched the flames dance. Outside she could hear the storm intensifying, snow building against the walls. They were well and truly cut off now. She went to the door and checked the bar again, a habit, though she didn't know what she was worried about. As her hand touched the wood, she heard something that made her freeze. Footsteps. Outside, barely audible over the wind, something was walking around the cabin. Slow, deliberate steps in the snow. Callen grabbed her rifle from beside the door and listened intently. The steps continued, around the north side of the cabin, across the front, along the south side, circling, not the random wandering of an animal. Too measured, too purposeful. She moved to the window and peered out into the darkness. The snow was falling so heavily she could barely see 10 feet. But for just a moment, she thought she glimpsed a figure, tall, human-shaped, standing motionless in the storm. Then it was gone. Callen stood with the rifle ready, listening. The footsteps completed one more circuit of the cabin, then stopped. The sudden silence was almost worse than the sound had been. She waited 10 minutes, 20, before finally setting the rifle down. Maybe it had been an animal after all. Maybe her nerves were playing tricks on her. But she knew the sounds of the mountain, and that hadn't been any animal she recognized. Moving quietly so as not to wake Velda, Callen checked on her guest one more time. The old woman slept deeply, her breathing steady and regular. Whatever ordeal she'd been through, her body was recovering. Callen returned to her chair by the fire. She wouldn't sleep tonight. Couldn't sleep. Too many questions, too many impossibilities, and beneath everything else, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years, the sense that something was about to change. That the careful, isolated life she'd built was about to crack open, and she had no idea what would emerge from the fissure. Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in the darkness, something waited. Morning came grey and muted. The storm had settled into steady snowfall, the wind calmed to occasional gusts. Callen had dozed fitfully in her chair, jerking awake at every sound. Now, with weak daylight filtering through the windows, she felt the exhaustion in her bones. She heard movement from the bedroom and rose to check on Velda. The old woman was sitting up, looking around the cabin with clear, alert eyes. A dramatic improvement from the night before. "Good morning," Velda said. "I hope you don't mind. I've been awake for a while, but I didn't want to disturb you. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you. Warm and rested. My feet are sore, but I've had worse." Velda paused. "I've been trying to remember how I got here. It's still foggy, but pieces are coming back." Callen moved to the stove to prepare coffee, real coffee, a luxury she rationed carefully. Something about Velda's presence made her want to offer more than the usual chicory substitute. "Tell me what you remember." Velda came out of the bedroom, moving stiffly but steadily. Callen noticed she'd wrapped herself in one of the blankets like a shawl. "I remember my apartment in Seattle. I lived alone. I'm a widow. My husband died 8 years ago. We have 2 children, but they're busy with their own lives. My daughter's in California, my son in Portland. I don't see them often." She accepted a cup of coffee and held it in both hands, warming her fingers. "I remember going to bed last Wednesday, or at least I think it was Wednesday. What day is it now?" "Friday. November 16th, Velda looked troubled. "Then I've lost 2 days. I don't remember Thursday at all, or most of Friday, until I found myself in the woods." She moved to the window and looked out at the snow-covered landscape. "I remember walking. It was like being in a dream. I knew I was moving, but I couldn't quite control it. And those stone markers I mentioned, they were important somehow. I had to follow them." Callen poured her own coffee and studied Velda carefully. In the daylight, the woman looked remarkably well for someone who'd nearly died of exposure the night before. Her color was good, her movements purposeful. It was almost unsettling how quickly she'd recovered. "Velda, those cairns you mentioned, the ones with markings. Can you describe the markings?" "They were simple. Just scratches, really. Lines and curves. Like—" Velda paused, her brow furrowing. "Like a child had carved them." The coffee cup nearly slipped from Callen's hand. She set it down carefully on the table. "A child? Yes, I don't know why I think that, but the marks had that quality. Not professional or artistic. Just," Velda struggled for the word, "earnest. Like someone trying very hard to communicate something important." Callen's throat felt tight. Her brother Tommy had carved marks into stones. Simple symbols that he insisted meant something, though he'd never explained what. She'd found dozens of them after the disappearance, scattered around the campsite. The rangers had dismissed them as a child's idle carving. "Velda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Have we met before?" Velda looked at her with surprise. "No, at least I don't think so. Why?" "Last night you were confused, in shock. But you knew things about this cabin. You described the layout. You found the coffee without asking where I kept it." Velda glanced at the cabinet where she'd apparently found the coffee pot. Her expression shifted from surprise to confusion. "I did, didn't I? I didn't even think about it. I just knew where it would be." Callen pressed forward, her heart beginning to race. "What else do you know about this place?" Velda looked around the cabin slowly. "There's a hidden compartment under the floorboards in the corner. You keep extra ammunition there? And dried herbs hang from the bedroom ceiling, medicines you've gathered from the forest." And she stopped, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There's a photograph. You keep it in a drawer by the bed. A family picture." Callen felt cold despite the warmth from the stove. "How do you know that?" "I don't know." Velda's hands trembled, coffee sloshing in her cup. "I shouldn't know any of this. I've never been here before. I'm certain of that. But it's like the information is just there in my head, and I can't explain how it got there." Callen moved to the bedroom and opened the drawer beside the bed. Beneath a small stack of maps and a spare knife, she found what she'd hidden there 23 years ago, a photograph of her family. Taken the day before they disappeared, she brought it out and held it so Velda couldn't see it. "Describe the photograph." Velda closed her eyes. "It's outdoors, mountains in the background. 4 people. A man in his late 40s with a fishing vest. A woman with long brown hair and a turquoise bracelet. A young woman, 20-something, with her father's eyes. And a boy, maybe 10 years old, holding something in his hands. A rock, I think. Callen's hands shook as she turned the photograph around. Every detail matched. How? Callen's voice came out harsh. How do you know this? Velda opened her eyes, and they were filled with fear. I don't know. God help me, I don't know. But there's more. The man's name was Jack. The woman was Susan. The girl... She looked at Callen with dawning horror. The girl was you. And the boy... Stop! Callen's voice cracked like a whip. Don't say another word. They stood in charged silence, the only sound the crackle of the fire and the soft whisper of falling snow outside. Finally, Velda spoke, her voice barely audible. I'm frightened. So am I. Callen set the photograph on the table between them. 4 faces smiling in the sunshine, frozen in a moment that would never come again. Her father's arm around her shoulders, her mother laughing at something Tommy had said. Tommy holding up a smooth river stone he'd found that morning, proud of his treasure, the last picture ever taken of her family. I need you to tell me everything you remember, Callen said. From the beginning. Don't leave anything out, no matter how strange it seems. Velda nodded and took a shaky breath. I remember being in the woods, but not just now, before. A long time ago. I was younger. There were other people. We were searching for something, someone. She looked up at Callen. We were searching for them. For your family. The world seemed to tilt beneath Callen's feet. You were part of the search party. I think so, yes, I remember now. I volunteered. I'd heard about the missing family, and I wanted to help. I spent 3 days walking through these mountains with the other volunteers. Velda's voice grew stronger as the memories solidified. I remember you. You were so young, so devastated. You wouldn't leave. Even after the professional searchers gave up, you stayed. Callen sat down heavily. I don't remember you. There were dozens of volunteers. You couldn't have known us all. But I remember you. Velda reached across the table, stopping just short of touching Callen's hand. And now, 30 years later, I'm here. I don't understand it, but I'm here. And somehow I know things I shouldn't know. Outside, the snow continued to fall, building drifts against the cabin walls. Inside, 2 women sat across from each other, separated by a table and joined by an impossible mystery that spanned 3 decades. Callen looked at the photograph one more time, then met Velda's frightened eyes. Tell me about the cairns, she said quietly. Tell me exactly where they led you from. Callen spread her topographical map across the table, smoothing the creases with careful hands. The map was annotated with her own notes, trails she'd scouted, areas of difficult terrain, places where she'd found lost hikers over the years, and in red ink marked with small crosses, the locations where her family had last been seen. Show me, she said to Velda. Show me where you entered the forest. Velda studied the map, her finger hovering over the paper. The storm had eased enough that the cabin was filled with grey morning light. Outside, everything was blanketed in fresh snow, pristine and quiet. Here, Velda said suddenly, her finger coming down on a section of the map labeled Deadfall Canyon. Callen's chest tightened. Are you sure? Yes, I don't know how I'm sure, but I am. I came from there. Velda traced a route with her finger, following a path that didn't correspond to any marked trail. Through here, across this ridge, down into this valley. Then I followed the cairns. Callen stared at the map. Deadfall Canyon was where her family's campsite had been, where they'd vanished without a trace. She'd searched that canyon dozens of times in the early years, until the rangers had finally forbidden her to go there alone. The terrain was too unstable. Too dangerous. That's impossible, Callen said. Deadfall Canyon is 12 miles from here, through some of the roughest terrain in the Cascades. Even in good weather, it would take an experienced hiker a full day to make that crossing. You did it in a nightgown and bare feet in a blizzard. I know it doesn't make sense. Velda's voice was patient but firm. But I'm telling you what I remember. I came from there. Callen pulled over her old journal, a leather-bound notebook where she'd documented every search, every clue, every dead end from those first desperate years. She'd stopped writing in it about a decade ago, when she'd finally accepted that her family was truly gone. But now she flipped through the pages, scanning entries she hadn't read in years. August 19th. Searched north section of Deadfall Canyon. Found nothing. Rangers say rockslide theory is most likely. I don't believe it. August 24th. Volunteer search party covered west approach. Woman named Velda Crane was kind. She held my hand when I broke down. Told me not to give up hope. Callen's hands trembled as she read. She looked up at Velda, who was watching her with knowing eyes. You did hold my hand, Callen whispered. I remember now. You were wearing a blue jacket. You had kind eyes. I still have that jacket, Velda said softly. In my closet in Seattle. I haven't worn it in years, but I've never been able to give it away. The connection between them was undeniable now, but it only deepened the mystery. Why had Velda, of all people, appeared at Callen's cabin 30 years later? Callen continued reading through her journal. Entry after entry documented the search. Hundreds of people combing through the mountains, finding nothing. And then, buried in an entry from late September, a detail that made her blood run cold. September 28th. Another searcher gone missing. Ranger Williams. Last seen near Deadfall Canyon. Search party found his equipment, but no trace of him. Third disappearance this month in the same area. Rangers closing off the canyon permanently. She'd forgotten about that. The investigation into her family's disappearance had been complicated by other disappearances. Search. Party members who'd vanished while looking for the birds. The Rangers had eventually attributed it to the dangerous terrain. But the canyon had been closed to the public ever since. How many people disappeared during the search? Velda asked, reading. Over Callen's shoulder. 5 that I know of. 3 volunteers and 2 rangers. Callen flipped through more pages. They were never found either. The official explanation was accidents, falls, exposure, getting lost in the maze of canyons. But you never believed it. No. Too many people, too experienced, and they all vanished in the same area where my family disappeared. Velda moved to the window, staring out at the white landscape. What if it wasn't accidents? What if something in that canyon is... She paused, searching for words. Collecting people? The words sent a chill down Callen's spine. Collecting. Like Tommy collected rocks. That's impossible, Callen said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? I'm here, aren't I? 200 miles from home, with no memory of traveling, knowing things I shouldn't know. What's your rational explanation for that? Callen had none. She'd been trying to find one since Velda appeared at her door, but every logical explanation ran into the hard wall of impossibility. The cairns, Callen said suddenly. You said they had symbols, childlike symbols. Yes. Callen went to a drawer and pulled out a small cloth bag. Inside were a dozen smooth stones, each one carved with simple symbols, lines, curves, spirals. She'd collected them from around her family's campsite, the only physical evidence of Tommy's presence that remained. She spread them on the table. Like these? Velda gasped. Yes, exactly like these same patterns. She picked up one of the stones, turning it over in her hands. Your brother made these. Tommy. He carved stones everywhere we went. Said they were messages, but he never explained what they meant. I thought it was just a game. They're not a game. Velda's voice was certain. They're markers, waypoints. He was trying to show someone the way. The way to what? I don't know, but I followed them, and they led me here. To you. The implications hung in the air between them. If Tommy had made the cairns and Velda had followed them decades later, then he could still be alive, Callen whispered. Or something of him is, Velda said carefully. Something that's been trying to communicate all this time. Callen's rational mind rebelled against the idea. It was too much, too impossible. But she thought of the circling footsteps the night before, of Velda's impossible knowledge, of 30 years of searching that had never found so much as a body. She thought of Tommy's earnest face as he carved, his symbols insisting they were important, that someone would understand them someday. The weather radio suddenly crackled to life, making both women jump. A voice emerged from the static, distorted, barely comprehensible. Storm warning extended. Dangerous conditions. Travelers should... The voice cut out, but not before Callen caught something odd about it. The cadence was wrong. The accent was from another era. And unless she was imagining things, the voice had said 1995 before cutting to static. 30 years ago. Velda met her eyes across the table. It's not just me, is it? Something's wrong with this whole mountain. Callen reached for the radio, but before she could adjust the frequency, they both heard it. The sound that had kept her awake all night. Footsteps in the snow, circling the cabin. Slow, deliberate, purposeful. But this time, they weren't alone. Multiple sets of footsteps, all walking in perfect synchronization, all moving in the same measured circle around the cabin. Callen grabbed her rifle and moved to the window. Through the falling snow, she caught glimpses of figures, tall, humanoid, but somehow not quite right. They moved with an odd, shuffling gait, their bare feet leaving clear prints in the fresh snow. "They're walking the same pattern I did," Velda said quietly. 3 circles, always 3. The figures completed their 3rd circuit and stopped. They stood at the cardinal points around the cabin, north, south, east, west, waiting. Callen tightened her grip on the rifle. "Stay back from the windows." But Velda moved closer, squinting through the snow. "I know them," she whispered. "I recognize them. They were with me, in the canyon, in the place between..." What place? The place where lost things gather. Before Callen could respond, all 4 figures turned and walked away into the forest, their footprints disappearing into the swirling snow. Within moments, they were gone, as if they'd never been there. Callen and Velda stood in silence, listening to the wind. Finally, Callen lowered the rifle. "We can't wait for rescue," she said. "We need answers, and there's only one place to find them." Velda nodded slowly. "Deadfall Canyon. As soon as the storm clears enough to travel. We'll need supplies, proper gear." Callen looked at the old woman. "You don't have to come. You could stay here where it's safe." "Safe?" Velda laughed, a sound without humor. "I walked 12 miles through a blizzard in my nightgown and somehow survived. I know things about you and your family that I shouldn't know. And something just circled your cabin, like we're being marked." She met Callen's eyes with determination. "I'm coming. Whatever's happening, I'm part of it, and I think I was brought here for a reason." Callen nodded. She understood. After 23 years of isolation, of running from the past, she was finally going to face it. Whatever waited, in Deadfall Canyon, answers, madness, or her family's fate, she would find it. Outside, the snow fell lighter now. The storm was breaking. By tomorrow they could travel. Callen looked at Tommy's carved stones on the table, those earnest symbols that might be messages from beyond impossible distances. "We leave at first light," she said. The storm cleared overnight, leaving the world transformed by snow. Callen woke before dawn, her body stiff from another night in the chair. She dozed fitfully, rifle across her lap, listening for sounds that never came. Velda emerged from the bedroom looking rested and determined. Over breakfast, they barely spoke, both women focused on the day ahead. Callen methodically prepared supplies, 2 packs with food, water, emergency blankets, fire-starting equipment, first aid, rope. She gave Velda proper winter clothing from her own limited supply, thermal underwear, wool socks, sturdy boots that were only slightly too large, a heavy jacket. "I haven't hiked in years," Velda admitted as she laced the boots. "Then we'll go slow. The terrain is rough and we'll be climbing." Callen paused. "Are you sure about this? You're 81 years old. This isn't going to be easy, I'm sure." Velda stood and tested the boots. "Besides, I made the journey once already in worse conditions. At least this time I'll be dressed for it." They set out as the sun rose, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold. The beauty was almost painful. Callen had forgotten how to notice such things during her years of isolation. Now, with Velda beside her and an impossible journey ahead, every detail seemed sharp and significant. The first miles were manageable, following the logging road until it gave way to a trail Callen knew well. But as they climbed higher, moving off established paths and into the wilderness, the difficulty increased. Velda moved slowly but steadily, her breathing labored but controlled. They stopped frequently to rest. During one break, Callen noticed something on a tree beside the trail, fresh blazes, marks cut into the bark. But they weren't from any official trail marking. They were crude, simple, like something a child would make. "Do you see these?" Callen asked Velda. The old woman studied the marks. "Yes, and I remember them. I followed these too, though I didn't know what they were." As they continued climbing, they found more marks, on trees, on rocks carved into fallen logs. Each one was fresh, as if made recently, but Callen knew that was impossible. Tommy had disappeared 30 years ago. Then Velda spotted the first cairn. It stood beside a boulder, 4 stones carefully balanced. The top stone bore carved symbols, the same patterns as Tommy's collection. But when Callen touched it, the stone was warm despite the freezing air. "It's wrong," Callen said softly. "Everything about this is wrong. These markers, they're old. They have to be 30 years old, but they look fresh. They feel—" She struggled for the word. "Active. Time doesn't work right here," Velda said. "I remember that from before. In the canyon, time feels slippery. Past and present blur together." They found more cairns as they climbed, each one marking a route through increasingly difficult terrain. Callen began to see a pattern. The cairns led them around obstacles, away from unstable ground, through the safest passages. Whoever built them had known the mountain intimately, or something had. By mid-afternoon, they reached a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. In the distance, Callen could see the entrance to Deadfall Canyon, a dark cleft between towering rock walls. "There," Velda pointed. "That's where I emerged from." Callen pulled out her map, comparing it to the landscape. According to the map, the canyon was still 3 miles away, but distances in the mountains were deceptive, measured not in straight lines, but in the time it took to navigate terrain. As they descended into the valley, they began to see other signs. Old camps that looked recently abandoned, a backpack hanging from a tree branch, its fabric sun-faded but not rotted. A sleeping bag spread on the ground, covered in fresh snow but showing no signs of aging. Initials carved in tree trunks, dates that ranged across decades, but all looked equally fresh. People have been trying to reach the canyon, Callen realized, or trying to leave it. The most disturbing discovery was a circle of tents in a small clearing. 7 tents, all empty, arranged in a perfect circle around a cold fire pit. Callen approached cautiously, rifle ready. Inside the first tent, she found equipment, modern camping gear, electronics, even a cell phone. She checked the phone. The battery was dead, but the date on the screen made her stomach clench. July 2023. Just 5 months ago. Velda, people have been here recently. But when she emerged from the tent, Velda wasn't looking at the camp. She was staring at something beyond it, her face pale. "Callen, look." Callen followed her gaze and felt her breath catch. Figures moved through the trees at the edge of the clearing, humanoid shapes that walked with that same shuffling gait she'd seen outside her cabin. There were dozens of them, maybe more, walking in different directions, but all moving with purpose. "They're looking for something," Velda whispered. "Or someone." One of the figures passed close enough for Callen to see details. It wore hiking gear from another era. Bell-bottom jeans, a faded denim jacket. Its feet were bare despite the snow. Its face was blank, eyes unfocused, moving as if in a trance. "Don't let them see us," Velda hissed, pulling Callen down behind the tents. They crouched in silence as the figures passed, close enough to hear their footsteps crunching in the snow. Callen counted at least 20 before they finally moved out of sight. "What are they?" Callen asked. "The lost ones. The ones who entered the canyon but never left." "Not really." Velda's voice was haunted. "I was becoming one of them. walking in. Circles, searching for something I couldn't remember, unable to find my way home. Then I saw the cairns, and something changed. They gave me direction. They led me out, led you to me. Yes, I don't think it was random. I think someone, something, wanted us to meet. Wanted you to know what's happening here. They waited until the figures were gone, then continued toward the canyon. The sun was lowering, shadows lengthening across the snow. Callen knew they needed to make camp soon, but something drove her forward. They were close now, so close to answers. As they climbed the final approach to the canyon entrance, Velda suddenly stopped. I remember this place. We searched here during those 3 days. Your family's campsite was just beyond that ridge. Callen's heart hammered. She hadn't been back to the campsite in over a decade, had deliberately avoided it. Show me. They climbed the ridge and looked down into a small clearing. The campsite was exactly as Callen remembered, a flat area near a stream, protected by a ring of pines. Even after 30 years, she could see where the tent had stood, where the fire pit had been, but something new had been added. In the center of the clearing stood a cairn, larger than any they'd seen before. 20 stones high, each one carved with symbols, and arranged around its base were dozens of Tommy's rocks, creating a circle, a pattern, a message. Callen approached slowly, her vision blurring with tears. This was more than markers. This was communication. Someone had been maintaining this place, adding to it, trying to say something across the barrier of years. She knelt beside the cairn and picked up one of the stones. On it, carved in familiar childish script, were letters that spelled out a single word. Sister. Velda knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. He's been trying to reach you all this time. Callen couldn't speak. She held the stone and wept for her lost family, for 30 years of grief, for the impossible hope rising in her chest. When she finally collected herself, she looked up at the canyon entrance ahead. Deadfall Canyon. The place where her family had vanished. The place where, impossibly, her brother might still be trying to communicate. We camp here tonight, she said. Tomorrow we go into the canyon. As darkness fell, they built a small fire and prepared a simple meal. Callen couldn't stop looking at the cairn, at Tommy's message. Sister, he remembered her. After 30 years in whatever place he'd been trapped, he still remembered. That night, as Velda slept and Callen kept watch, she heard voices on the wind. Her mother's laugh, her father calling her name, Tommy singing the silly songs he used to make up about rocks. She didn't know if they were memories or something more, but she listened to them until dawn, and for the first time in 30 years, she felt something other than grief. She felt hope. Morning came cold and clear. Callen woke with frost on her sleeping bag, and Velda already up, studying the cairn in the dawn light. The old woman looked stronger somehow, more solid, as if proximity to the canyon was restoring something in her. Did you hear them last night? Velda asked without turning around. The voices. Yes, they're calling us forward, inviting us in. Velda finally looked at Callen. But we need to be careful. The canyon doesn't just trap people, it confuses them, makes them forget who they are, where they came from. If we go in unprepared, we might not come back out. They spent the morning preparing. Callen insisted they leave a trail marker, a note weighted with stones at the campsite, explaining where they'd gone. In case they didn't return, someone might eventually find it. She also left her journal, the record of her search and everything they'd discovered. Then they broke camp and approached the canyon entrance. The opening was narrow, barely 15 feet across, flanked by towering walls of granite. The rock face was weathered and cracked, showing evidence of ancient rock slides. A path led inward, marked by more of Tommy's cairns. This is it, Callen said. The place my family disappeared. They entered slowly, Callen's senses on high alert. The temperature dropped immediately and sound behaved strangely. Their footsteps echoed wrong, repeating too many times or not at all. The walls seemed to lean inward, oppressive despite the open sky above. The cairns led them deeper. Each one bore Tommy's symbols, growing more complex as they progressed. Callen photographed each one, trying to decipher meaning, but the patterns remained stubbornly opaque. After an hour of careful hiking, the canyon opened into an amphitheater, a circular space perhaps 200 feet across, surrounded by sheer walls. At the far end, the rock face bore strange formations, almost architectural in their precision. And there, barely visible unless you knew what to look for, was a seam in the stone. "The door," Velda whispered. "That's where I came through." They approached cautiously. Up close, the seam was more obvious, a crack in the rock that suggested a passage beyond. But when Callen pressed her hand against it, the stone was solid. "How did you open it?" "I don't remember opening it. Velda frowned. "I walked toward it and it opened, like it was waiting for me." Callen examined the surrounding rock, looking for mechanisms or hidden levers. Nothing, just solid granite and that impossible seam. Then she noticed the ground. At the base of the rock face in the snow were footprints, fresh ones, her size, her boot pattern. "That's impossible. I've never been here before." But even as she said it, fragments of memory surfaced. A younger Callen, wild with grief, searching desperately, finding this canyon, standing before this door, trying to follow her family through. "I have been here," she said slowly. 30 years ago, during the search, I found this place. What happened? I don't remember." The memories were there but blurred, like trying to recall a dream. "I think I tried to go through, and something stopped me, sent me back, made me forget." Velda touched the stone. "The mountain decides who enters and who doesn't. It let me through." "It wouldn't let you. Why? Maybe you weren't ready, or maybe—" Velda's expression was troubled. "Maybe if you'd entered then, you would have been trapped like the others. Maybe you were sent back to survive, to live, so that you could return now. When you were strong enough to help them." Callen studied the seam in the rock. Her family was beyond this door. She was certain of it now. 30 years of searching, and the answer had always been here, in a place she'd somehow been made to forget. She pulled out her compass, the same one her father had given her years ago. As she held it near the door, the needle spun wildly, then locked onto a direction that didn't exist in normal space. It pointed straight at the stone. "My father's compass," Callen said. "He had it when they disappeared. I found it later in the abandoned camp, but now it's pointing through the door. He's there. They're all there." Before Velda could respond, they heard sounds echoing from deeper in the canyon. Footsteps, many of them, approaching from multiple directions. "The lost ones," Velda said. "They're coming." Figures emerged from side canyons and narrow passages, dozens of people in clothing from different eras, all walking with that same shuffling, purposeless gait. They converged on the amphitheater, drawn by some invisible signal. Callen and Velda pressed back against the rock face. The lost ones filled the space, moving in patterns that almost seemed choreographed. They walked in circles, crossing paths, pausing and starting again. Some muttered to themselves. Others were silent. "They're trapped in loops," Velda said, repeating the same actions over and over. "I was doing this, walking in circles, searching for something I couldn't remember." One figure passed close enough for Callen to see clearly, a young woman in a ranger uniform from the 1990s. Her name tag read Williams, Ranger Williams. One of the people who disappeared during the search for Callen's family. "Ranger Williams," Callen called out. The woman didn't respond. She continued her circular path, eyes unfocused. Callen tried again, louder. "Ranger Williams, can you hear me?" This time the woman paused. Her head turned slowly, as if hearing something from far away. For a moment, her eyes cleared, and she looked directly at Callen with dawning recognition. You're the girl. The missing family girl. But you're old now."
"How are you old?"
Her voice was confused, frightened. "What year is it?" 2024 November. Williams looked down at her hands, at her uniform. No, that's wrong. It's 1995. I was searching for the Byrd family. I found something in the canyon, a door in the stone. I went through and her voice broke. "How long have I been here?" 29 years. The ranger's face crumpled. No, that's impossible. It's only been—" She stopped, awareness dawning. "I've been walking in circles for 29 years, searching for a way out." Over and over, other figures began to pause, turning toward Callen and Velda, awareness spreading like ripples through the crowd. One by one, the lost ones stopped their endless walking and looked at the two women with varying degrees of recognition and horror. "You came from outside," a man in 1970s hiking gear said. "You remember the outside?" "Yes," Callen said. "We came to find answers, to help if we can." "Help?" An elderly woman laughed bitterly. "There is no help. There's only the canyon, the endless canyon, the door that opens but never closes. We're not lost. We're kept. Kept by what?" The elderly woman pointed at the stone door. "By what waits inside. The keeper. It preserves us, it says. Protects us. But protection and prison are the same thing when you can't leave." Callen felt the weight of dozens of eyes on her. These people had been trapped here for years, decades, caught in some kind of temporal loop that kept them suspended, but not truly alive. "My family," Callen said. "My father, mother, and brother. Are they here, beyond the door? Some are beyond. Some are here. Some are both." The elderly woman's expression softened. "Your brother, the little one who carved stones. He's special. He's aware. He's been trying to help us, trying to show us the way out. But we couldn't understand his markers, couldn't follow them. But I did," Velda said. "I followed them and they led me outside." "To Callen!" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Hope fragile and desperate. Can you lead us out?" Ranger Williams asked. "Can you follow the markers back?" Callen looked at the assembled lost ones. People who'd been trapped for decades, walking in circles, waiting for someone to find them. Her brother had been trying to save them. His cairns, his markers, were more than messages. They were a map. "Yes," Callen said. "But first I need to go through the door. I need to find my family and understand what's keeping you all trapped. Then we'll find a way to free everyone. If you go through, you might not come back," the elderly woman warned. "The Keeper doesn't let people leave easily." "I know," Callen turned to Velda. "You don't have to come with me. You could lead these people out now, following the cairns in reverse." Velda shook her head. "I came out alone. I need to understand why. And I think—" She paused, choosing words carefully. "I think I was meant to help you. Not just guide you here, but go with you. Whatever's beyond that door, you'll need someone who's been through it before." Callen nodded. She turned back to the door, compass in hand. The needle pointed straight through the stone. "Stay here," she told the lost ones. "Don't lose hope. We're going to end this." She placed her hand on the stone, and this time she felt it respond. A vibration like a heartbeat. The seam widened just a fraction. "It's opening," Velda said. The stone shifted, grinding slowly inward. Beyond the opening, Callen could see, not darkness, but a soft, sourceless light. A space that shouldn't exist. She took a deep breath and looked at Velda. Together. They stepped through the stone door, and the world changed. The sensation was like surfacing from deep water, pressure releasing, sounds becoming clear, colors sharpening. Callen gasped and stumbled, Velda catching her arm to steady her. They stood in the same amphitheater, but different. The rock walls were the same, but the light came from everywhere and nowhere. The sky above was neither day nor night, but a perpetual twilight. And the air, it felt thick, weighted, as if time itself had substance. "This is the place between," Velda said softly. "Where the lost are kept," Callen looked back. The stone door was still visible behind them, but through it she could no longer see the canyon they'd left. Instead, she saw layers, different versions of the canyon from different times, all occupying the same space. She glimpsed her family's campsite from 30 years ago, a search party from the 1970s, figures in even older clothing from decades before that. Time doesn't flow here, Callen realized. It layers. Everything that happened in the canyon is still happening. Yes, that's why the lost ones can't leave. They're caught in their own moments, unable to move forward or back. They began walking. The canyon extended impossibly far, much larger than it should be. Side passages branched off in all directions, and through them Callen could see people, some walking in circles like the lost ones outside, others frozen in place like statues, still others flickering between different moments of their lives. And there, in the distance, she saw a campfire that never consumed its wood. Around it sat 3 figures, her breath caught. That's them. They moved toward the campfire, Callen's heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her chest. As they got closer, details resolved. Her father, still 48 years old, pointing at a map spread on the ground. Her mother, 45, pouring coffee from a thermos. Tommy, 10, examining a rock with intense concentration. They were exactly as she remembered, frozen in the moment before they disappeared. But as Callen approached, drawn by 30 years of longing, Velda stopped her with a hand on her arm. "Wait, something's not right." Callen turned, confused, and saw Velda's face changing. The confusion and kindness were melting away, replaced by something older, sadder, and infinitely more complex. "I'm sorry." "Callen," Velda said, and her voice carried multiple tones, as if many people were speaking at once. "I'm so sorry I had to do it this way." "What are you talking about?" Velda's form flickered, becoming translucent for a moment before solidifying again. "I'm not who you think I am. Or rather, I am, but I'm also something more. The real Velda Crane died during the search 30 years ago. She fell in the canyon and the mountain preserved her. What I am, what came to your door, is a construct, a vessel made from her memories and the memories of others who've been lost here." Callen stepped back, raising her rifle. "What are you?" "I'm the mountain's attempt to communicate. It's been trying to reach you for decades, but you built walls so high nothing could get through. So it made me someone you would help, someone who would trigger your need for answers. It sent me to bring you here." "The mountain?" Callen's mind reeled. "The mountain is what? Alive? Conscious? Not the way you think of consciousness. It's more like—" Velda struggled for words. "A threshold. A boundary between states of being. And something very old guards that threshold. Something that's been preserving people for longer than you can imagine." She gestured around them. "This place, it catches people in moments of crisis, moments of transformation or danger. Your family was about to be caught in a rock slide. The mountain saw the danger and pulled them here, into safety. But safety became a prison." Callen wanted to deny it, to call it madness. But she'd seen too much. The impossible journey, the knowledge Velda shouldn't have, the way time bent in the canyon. If you're not Velda, then what are you? "Really, I'm a messenger. A bridge. The mountain doesn't understand humans well enough to communicate directly, so it made me from the memories of those it's preserved. Everything I said to you was true. The real Velda did search for your family, did hold your hand when you broke down. Those memories are mine now." She paused, pain crossing her face. "And the warmth I felt, the connection we made, that was real too. Even if I'm not entirely real, what I felt for you was genuine. Why bring me here? What does the mountain want? It wants you to free them. All of them. Your family, the lost ones, everyone caught in this place. It's grown confused over centuries. It was meant to protect, but it's forgotten how to let go. You're the key. The one person who can enter fully conscious, who can face what maintains this place and make a choice. What choice? Whether to close the threshold entirely, to let the mountain be just a mountain again and release everyone it's been keeping." Callen looked at her family, still frozen by their campfire. "And if I close it, what happens to them?" Velda's expression was sorrowful. "They return to the moment they were caught. The rock slide still falls. The danger still exists. They'll have to face what the mountain saved them from. They could die, yes, or they could survive. But either way, they'll be free to move forward. Right now they're safe but trapped. Preserved but not living." Callen felt her legs weaken. She sat heavily on a boulder. 30 years of searching, and the answer was this. Her family was alive but frozen. And the only way to free them was to put them back in danger. There has to be another way. There isn't. I've seen the mountain's memories. I know its nature. It can only preserve or release. There's no middle ground. Callen looked at Velda, or whatever Velda had become. "You said you were made from memories. Are you here when you leave this place?" Or do you cease to exist when your purpose is fulfilled? Velda smiled sadly. You already know the answer. I'm already fading. By the time you make your choice, I'll be gone. I'm just a message. And once delivered, messages fade. That's not fair, Callen's voice cracked. You're a person. You have thoughts, feelings. You deserve to exist. I'm grateful you think so. It made this time we had together meaningful. Velda was becoming more transparent now, her form wavering. Go to them, Callen. Your family. They've been waiting for you, and they're aware, more aware than most who are kept here. Your brother especially. He's been fighting against the preservation, trying to maintain his consciousness, leaving markers to communicate. Talk to them, then decide what to do. Wait, but Velda was fading faster now, her form dissolving like mist. You were kind to me. You treated me as human even when you suspected I wasn't. Thank you for that gift. Her voice was barely a whisper. And whatever you choose, know that it's the right choice. The mountain trusts you. That's why it brought you here. Then she was gone, leaving only the torn nightgown she'd worn. Falling to the ground like shed skin, Callen stood alone in the impossible canyon, holding the fabric that was all that remained of her companion. She'd lost Velda twice now, once to the mountain 30 years ago, and again to revelation moments before. But she wasn't entirely alone. Ahead, her family waited, still frozen by their campfire, unaware that their daughter and sister stood watching them. Callen folded the nightgown carefully and tucked it into her pack. Then, with trembling legs and a heart full of grief and hope, she walked toward the campfire. As she approached, she saw something that made her stop. The frozen scene was beginning to move. Slowly, as if time was remembering how to flow, her father lowered the map. Her mother set down the thermos. Tommy looked up from his rock, and all three of them turned to look at her. Her father's eyes widened. Callen! Callen, what are you doing here? He stood, moving toward her. Honey, you're supposed to wait at the visitor center. We told you. Then he stopped, really seeing her. The lines on her face, the silver in her hair, the 30 years that had passed. Oh, God, her mother whispered. What happened to you? Tommy just stared, his child's mind trying to process the impossibility. Callie, is that really you? You're old. Callen's vision blurred with tears. After 3 decades, after a lifetime of searching, here they were. Her family, still alive, still themselves, but frozen in a moment that should have passed long ago. Mom, Dad, Tommy. Her voice broke on her brother's name. It's me, and I'm here to take you home. Her father reached her first, hands on her shoulders, studying her face with confusion and growing horror. You can't be. How old are you? 52, her mother gasped. That's impossible. We were just setting up camp yesterday. It was yesterday. For you, maybe. For me, it's been 30 years. Callen couldn't stop the tears now. 30 years since you disappeared. Tommy dropped his rock and ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. You found us. I knew you would. I left markers everywhere. Did you see them? Callen knelt and pulled him close, breathing in the scent of him. Little boy sweat and pine sap and something uniquely Tommy. He felt solid and real and impossible all at once. I saw them, buddy. Every single one. They led me right to you. Her father's face had gone pale. He'd looked around the canyon, really seeing it for the first time. Where are we? This doesn't make sense. Sit down, Callen said gently. All of you. I need to explain what happened. They gathered by the campfire that never consumed its wood, and Callen told them everything. The disappearance, the massive search, the years she'd spent looking for them, the cabin she'd built, the life she'd lived in isolation, and finally, Velda's arrival and the truth about what had taken them. Her mother wept quietly, one hand pressed to her mouth. Her father's jaw tightened, that look he got when processing difficult information. But Tommy listened with an intensity that seemed beyond his years. I knew, Tommy said when she finished. I knew we were stuck. Everyone else here keeps forgetting, going in circles. But I remembered you and the camp, and that we needed to get out. So I made markers. I couldn't reach you, but I thought maybe someone would find them and know what they meant. How did you stay aware when others couldn't? Tommy shrugged, a gesture so familiar it made Callen's heart ache. I don't know. Maybe because I'm a kid. Kids are good at remembering what's important. And you were important. Getting back to you was the most important thing. Her father stood and walked to the edge of their small area, looking out at the impossible canyon. So we're trapped here, in some kind of, what? Temporal bubble? Preserved like specimens in amber? Yes, but there's a way out. They all turned to look at her. The mountain, the thing that maintains this place. It's confused. It was trying to protect you from danger, but it doesn't know how to let go. I can close the threshold, release everyone who's trapped here. But, her mother's voice was steady despite her tears. But you'd return to the moment you were taken. There was a rock slide coming. That's what the mountain was protecting you from. If I release you, you'll have to face that danger again. Silence fell over the campfire. Her father returned and sat beside her mother, taking her hand. They exchanged a look. That married couple communication that needed no words. We might die, her father said slowly. Yes, or we might survive and have a chance to actually live again. To see you grown, to meet grandchildren if you have them. To have futures instead of an eternal present, that's the choice. Her mother looked at Tommy, then at Callen. What kind of life have you had, sweetheart? In these 30 years? Callen thought about the cabin, the isolation, the decades spent running from connection and grief. Not much of one, she admitted. I survived. I helped people when I could, but I didn't really live. I was stuck too, just in a different way. Then we already know what happens when we choose safety over life. Her mother's voice was firm. We don't want that for you anymore. And we don't want it for us. Tommy pulled away from Callen and ran to his collection of rocks, dozens of them arranged in careful patterns. He selected one, the smoothest and most perfectly carved, and brought it back to her. This is my best one, he said. I've been working on it forever. It's a map and a message. It shows the way through the canyon and it says, he pointed to symbols carved in sequence. It says, family finds family, and together we're strong and don't be afraid. Callen took the stone, her vision blurring again. You made this while you were trapped here? I had a lot of time. Tommy's attempt at a joke, trying to lighten the moment like he always did. Her father cleared his throat. So how do we do this? How do we close the threshold? I need to find the keeper. The entity that maintains this place. Velda said it's deeper in the canyon. Once I find it, I can... Callen paused. She actually didn't know what she could do. Velda hadn't explained that part before fading away. Then we go together, her father said. We're a family. We face things together. Jack, she's a grown woman now, her mother said gently. She's been facing things alone for 30 years. Maybe we should... No, Callen's voice was firm. Dad's right. Together. I didn't come this far to leave you behind now. They prepared to move deeper into the canyon. Callen shared what little food she had, trail mix and jerky, that seemed absurdly mundane in this impossible place. Her family didn't need to eat here, she realized. They were preserved, suspended, requiring nothing. But they ate anyway, savoring the taste of something real, something from outside. As they packed up, Callen noticed other figures watching from the edges of the firelight. The lost ones from different eras, drawn by the activity, by the presence of someone from outside. Ranger Williams approached, moving with more purpose than before. You're going to the heart of it? To the keeper? Yes, others have tried. They never came back, she paused. Or they came back changed. More lost than before? I have something they didn't. Callen gestured to her family. I have a reason that matters more than fear. Williams nodded slowly. Man, take this. She removed her ranger badge and pressed it into Callen's hand. I was trying to protect people when I got trapped. If you can free us all, that's the protection I always meant to provide. Make it mean something. Callen closed her hand around the badge. I will. Other lost ones came forward, each offering something. A button, a photograph, a carved initial. Tokens of their trapped lives, given to this woman who might finally set them free. Callen accepted each one, understanding the weight of their hope. Then, with her family beside her, and the weight of dozens of trapped souls resting on her shoulders. Callen led them deeper into the canyon. The path Tommy's cairns marked grew stranger as they progressed. The rock walls began to show patterns, not natural formations, but something almost deliberate. Symbols appeared in the stone, similar to Tommy's carvings but older, more complex. The light shifted in color, from twilight gray to something more golden, almost warm. "The mountain is aware of us," her mother said quietly. "I can feel it watching. It's been watching this whole time," Tommy said. "Sometimes it feels friendly. Other times it feels scared." "I think it's lonely." Callen glanced at her brother. "Lonely? It's been doing the same thing for so long, keeping and preserving and protecting. But nobody ever talks to it. Nobody ever asks what it wants out of the mouths of children," Callen thought. What if Tommy was right? What if the mountain wasn't a threat, but a confused, lonely entity doing what it thought was right? They walked for what felt like hours, but might have been minutes. Time still moved strangely here. Finally, they reached a massive cavern, easily 300 feet across. The walls soared up into darkness, and at the center stood something that took Callen's breath away. It wasn't quite a structure, and not quite a living thing. A massive formation of crystal and stone, pulsing with soft light, seemed to grow from the cavern floor. It was beautiful and terrible and ancient beyond measure. "The Heartstone," her father whispered. "That's what's been keeping us." As they approached, Callen could see images inside the crystal, moments frozen in time. People on the verge of falling, of drowning, of being crushed by rock slides. All of them caught in the instant before disaster and held there forever. And standing before the Heartstone was a figure. It was humanoid, but not human. Tall and slender, seemingly made of shadow and stone and something else, maybe the mountain's consciousness given form. Its face was smooth and featureless, but Callen felt it watching them with interest and something that might have been relief. "You came," it said, its voice like wind through deep caves, like water over stone, like time itself speaking. Finally, after so long, someone came who could understand. Callen's family pressed close behind her. She stepped forward, Tommy's carved stone in one hand and her father's compass in the other. "I'm here," she said to the ancient thing before her. "I'm here to make things right, to free them all. Tell me what I need to do." The keeper tilted its head, studying her with senses beyond sight. "First," it said, "you must understand. Then you must choose." And then it paused, something almost like sadness in its timeless voice. "Then you must be willing to pay the price." The keeper gestured toward the Heartstone, and images flowed across its surface, centuries of moments, thousands of people, all caught in crisis. "I preserve," it said simply. "I protect. I keep what would be lost. This is my purpose. This is what I was made to do." "Made by whom?" Callen asked. "By the mountain itself when it gained awareness. By the convergence of deep time and human need. By accident or design, I no longer remember." The keeper moved closer, its form shifting like smoke. "I have saved so many. Kept them from death, from pain, from loss. Given them eternity and safety. But it's not life," Callen said. "Safety isn't the same as living, isn't it?" The keeper sounded genuinely confused. "They do not suffer. They do not age. They do not die. What more could humans want?" Tommy stepped forward, his child's courage making Callen's heart swell. "We want to grow up. We want birthdays and Christmas and learning new things. We want to fight with our sisters and make up. We want to be sad sometimes, because being sad means we were happy first. You can't have all that if nothing ever changes." The keeper regarded Tommy with what might have been curiosity. "You are the one who stayed aware. Who fought against the preservation. Yeah, because being kept safe isn't the same as being alive. My sister taught me that before we got stuck here. She taught me that good things are worth risking bad things." The keeper turned its attention to Callen's parents. "And you? Do you agree? Would you risk death for the chance to live?" Her father spoke first. "We lost 30 years with our daughter. We missed watching her grow into the strong woman standing in front of us. We missed everything. If we stay here, we miss everything forever. I'd rather have one real day with her than an eternity of this." Her mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. Let us go. Let us all go, please. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, we choose life. The keeper was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried a weight of centuries. I cannot simply let you go. The threshold must be closed properly, or the preservation will collapse chaotically. Everyone would be released at once, returning to their moments of crisis without warning or preparation. It gestured to the Heartstone. To close the threshold, someone must take my place. Someone must become the new keeper, maintaining the boundary while others pass through safely. Only then can everyone be released. Callen felt her stomach drop. This was the price Velda had mentioned. For how long? Until the last soul passes through. Days perhaps, or weeks. Time moves differently here. You would experience it as a long vigil, but outside it would be only moments. And after, what happens to whoever becomes the keeper? They return to themselves. Changed, perhaps. Aged by the vigil. But alive and free. Callen looked at her family, her aging parents, her 2 young brother. Then at the Heartstone, showing all the trapped souls depending on her choice. There was really no question. I'll do it. No! Her father's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. You've already sacrificed 30 years. I'll take the vigil. I'm the father. It's my job to protect my family. Jack, no, her mother began. Mom, Dad, stop. Tommy's voice cut through the argument. It can't be either of you. You'd age more. You'd lose even more time. It has to be Callie. She's strongest and she's already lived those 30 years. She can handle a few more days. Callen knelt in front of her brother, putting her hands on his small shoulders. When did you get so wise? I had 30 years stuck in one moment. That's a lot of time to think. He managed a shaky smile. Besides, you found us. You came all this way. You finished the job. Her father looked like he wanted to argue more, but her mother placed a hand on his arm. He's right, Jack. She's the one. She always was. Callen stood and faced the keeper. What do I need to do? The keeper moved to the Heartstone and placed one shadowy hand against its surface. Touch the stone, accept the vigil, and guide each soul through their transition. You will feel their fear, their hope, their moments of crisis. You will hold the threshold steady while they pass. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done. I understand. Do you? The keeper's voice was gentle now, almost sad. Once you begin, you cannot stop until all are released. You will be alone with the weight of hundreds of lives, feeling every moment of their fear. Are you truly willing? Callen thought of Velda, who had walked through a blizzard to bring her here, of Ranger Williams and the elderly woman, and all the lost ones walking in circles, trapped in their moments, of her family, who deserved a chance to live again. She placed her hand on the Heartstone. I'm willing. The world exploded into light and feeling and time itself. Breaking open, Callen gasped as consciousness flooded. Through her, not just her own, but hundreds of others. She felt the Heartstone's pulse become her pulse, felt the threshold's boundaries become her awareness. She was everywhere at once, holding the impossible space together through sheer will. The keeper's form was dissolving, its purpose releasing like a held breath. Thank you, it whispered. I was so tired, so very tired. Then it was gone, and Callen was alone at the center of the vigil. Her family stood before her, but already they seemed distant, as if she was viewing them through water. She could feel the transition beginning, her father's moment of crisis, the rock slide suspended in time, waiting to fall. Dad, when you go back, run north, she said, her voice echoing strangely. The slide comes from the south. You'll have maybe 30 seconds. Take Mom and Tommy north toward the ridge. You'll make it, her father nodded, understanding. He pulled her mother and Tommy close. We'll see you on the other side, sweetheart. We'll wait for you. I love you all, Callen's voice broke. So much. Every day for 30 years. We love you too, her mother said. And come back to us, Tommy held up his carved stone. Don't forget, family finds family. We'll be waiting. Then they were gone, passing through the threshold like mist, returning to their moment of crisis 30 years ago. Callen felt it all, the terror, the falling rocks, the desperate scramble for safety. But she also felt them make it, felt them reach the ridge and survive. They were free. They were alive. Relief flooded through her, but there was no time to rest. The lost ones were beginning to stir, drawn by the opening threshold. One by one, they approached the Heartstone, ready to return to their own moments. Ranger Williams came first. Callen felt her crisis, a fall in the canyon, a broken ankle, cold setting in. "Turn east when you return," Callen told her. "There's a cairn 30 feet from where you fell. It marks a safe path." Williams nodded and stepped through. Callen felt her moment, the pain, the fear, but then the discovery of the cairn, the safe path, the rescue that would come. Another one freed, the elderly woman from the amphitheater. A young man from the 1960s, a family of 3 from the 1980s. One by one they came. One by one, Callen guided them through their crises, using knowledge she shouldn't have but did. The mountain's memories flowing through her now, showing her the safe paths, the right choices, the moments where survival was possible. Each passage took something from her. She felt herself aging, stretching thin, becoming less solid. But she held on. She had to. So many still waited. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time had no meaning at the center of the vigil. Callen existed in a state of pure purpose, pure will, holding the threshold steady, while soul after soul passed through to freedom. Some crises she couldn't prevent. Some people returned to their moments and died anyway, but they died in real time, moving forward, not trapped forever. Even those deaths were a kind of freedom. Finally, only one remained. The real Velda Crane, not the construct, but the young woman who'd fallen during the search 30 years ago. She appeared before Callen, looking confused but hopeful. "You're the last one," Callen said, her voice barely a whisper now. "Go home, live your life. It won't be the same life you would have had. You'll be 30 years displaced. But you'll be free," Velda smiled. "The construct, the one made from my memories." Was she kind? Very kind. And brave. She brought me here. Then some part of me did good in this world. That's enough. Velda stepped through the threshold, and Callen felt her moment, the fall, the impact, but then hands reaching down, pulling her up. A rescue that had always been possible, if only she'd been able to move forward from that frozen instant. Now the amphitheater was empty. The Heartstone pulsed one final time, then went dark. The light faded from the impossible canyon. The threshold was closing. Callen felt herself being released from the vigil. The weight of hundreds of lives lifted from her consciousness. She was just herself again, tired, aged by the experience, but free. She collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Her hands were older, more lined. Her body felt heavy with exhaustion. But she was alive. She was herself. And the threshold was closed. The mountain was just a mountain again. Slowly, painfully, Callen stood. The cavern around her was changing, becoming more solid, more real. The sourceless light was fading, replaced by natural darkness. She pulled out her flashlight, mundane technology in a mundane world, and it worked normally now. She was alone in an ordinary cave, deep in Deadfall Canyon. The impossible space was gone. But outside, in the real world, her family was waiting. 30 years displaced but alive. Free to grow old, to live, to be together. Callen turned toward the entrance and began the long walk home. The journey out of Deadfall Canyon took 3 days. Callen moved slowly, her body exhausted from the vigil. She'd aged during those timeless hours. Her hair was more silver now, new lines etched into her face. But she was alive, and more importantly, she was moving forward. The lost ones she'd freed had left the amphitheater, returned to their own times through the threshold. The canyon was empty now, truly empty, for the first time in centuries. Just rock and wind and the ordinary dangers of the mountains. When she finally emerged from the canyon entrance, she found them waiting exactly where she'd told them to wait. Her father, her mother, and Tommy, 30 years displaced but solid and real and wonderfully. Impossibly alive. Tommy saw her first and ran, no longer the 10-year-old child, but now a 40-year-old man who'd lived through his moment of crisis and survived. Time had caught up with him in the hours since his release, his body aging rapidly to where it should have been. He stumbled, still adjusting to adult limbs and adult weight, but his grin was pure Tommy. You made it. He caught her in a hug that nearly knocked her over. I knew you would. I told them you would. Her parents had aged too, her father now 78, her mother 75, their bodies catching up to the years they should have lived. They looked weary and confused, but vitally, beautifully alive. Her mother wept as she embraced Callen. My baby, my brave, strong girl. What did that place do to you? Aged me a few years. Callen managed a tired smile. But I'll live. We all will. They made camp at the site where Callen and Velda had stayed. The large cairn with Tommy's message was still there, but the rock that had said sister was gone. Callen had taken it with her, a reminder of her brother's persistent love across impossible distances. That night, around a real fire that consumed real wood, they talked. Callen explained the modern world they'd re-entered, the technology, the changes, the life she'd built in their absence. Her parents listened with wonder and grief, mourning the years they'd lost, but grateful for the years they might still have. What happens now? Her father asked. We don't legally exist anymore. We were declared dead decades ago. How do we? We'll figure it out, Callen said. One step at a time. First, we get off this mountain. Then we go to my cabin. Then we contact the authorities and start the complicated process of explaining the unexplainable. Will anyone believe us? Her mother asked. Tommy laughed, the sound strange coming from an adult body with a child's laugh. Does it matter? We're here. We're real. They can run whatever tests they want. Over the following days, they made their way back to Callen's cabin. The journey was difficult. Her parents tired easily, and Tommy kept stumbling, unused to his adult height and weight. But they helped each other, and they made it. The cabin felt different with people in it. Callen had lived alone for so long that the sound of voices, of movement, of life was almost overwhelming. But it was a good overwhelming. Her mother cooked on the wood stove, exclaiming over the challenge and joy of it. Her father examined Callen's tracking tools with admiration. Tommy explored the cabin like the curious child he still was inside, marveling at everything his sister had built. They spent a week there, recovering and adjusting, before Callen felt ready to make the trek down to Ridgeway. She knew what was coming. The questions, the disbelief, the media attention. The Byrd family, missing for 30 years, suddenly returned. It would be a sensation, but she also knew they'd have support. Ranger Williams had made it out. Callen had felt her survival during the vigil. She'd corroborate their story. And there would be others. People who'd been freed from the canyon and returned to their own times. Some wouldn't speak up, wouldn't want the attention, but some would, and their combined testimony would carry weight. The morning they left for town, Callen stood at her cabin door one last time, looking at the home she'd built in isolation. She wouldn't be coming back here, she knew. That chapter of her life was over. Any regrets? Tommy asked, joining her. About leaving? No, this place served its purpose. It kept me alive when I needed to be alive. But I don't need it anymore. What do you need? Callen looked at her family, her elderly parents sitting on the porch bench, her adult brother who was learning to walk all over again. This, you, connection, a reason to move forward instead of staying stuck. Tommy, grown now but still her little brother, put his arm around her shoulders. Then let's go, together. They walked down the mountain as a family, leaving the cabin and the past behind. The journey was slow but full of conversation, laughter, and the occasional argument, normal family chaos that Callen had dreamed of for 30 years. When they reached Ridgeway, Sheriff Dutton, old now and long retired, was the first person they saw. He was sitting on a bench outside the general store, and when he saw them, his coffee cup slipped from his hands. "That's impossible," he whispered. Callen smiled. "You'd be surprised what's possible, Sheriff. We've got quite a story to tell you." As they walked into town, people stopped and stared. Word spread quickly. The ghost woman of the mountains had returned, and she'd brought the impossible with her. The family everyone thought was lost forever. Sometimes the knock on your door changes everything. Sometimes it brings back what you've spent a lifetime trying to forget. But sometimes, if you're brave enough to answer, it brings back what you thought you'd lost forever. And that, Callen thought, as her mother took her hand and squeezed, was worth every impossible moment. The mountain stood behind them, just a mountain now. No longer a keeper of lost souls, but a reminder that even the longest searches can end in finding. Even the deepest grief can transform into joy. Even the most broken families can be made whole. They'd been lost. All of them in different ways. Now they were found. And they were home.